meaningfully fighting racial discrimination and racial inequity requires us to center the experiences of Black women and Indigenous women, immigrant women, LGBTI women, because there is a common historical root to the inequities and inequalities that manifest in these spaces. We understand the source of so much of this to be the ways race was constructed to normalize and habituate people to white supremacy. We understand how patriarchy has operated to sustain certain power dynamics. And when we look at the experiences of Black and brown women, of LGBTI women, we're able to understand in their intersectionality how patriarchy, white supremacy, and ongoing wielding of race as a construct continues to oppress, continues to create, perpetuate, and sustain systems of racial inequity and racial inequality. If we fail to look at our racial identities as coalitional, as including our gender, our sexual orientation, our gender identities, our status as immigrants, if we fail to look at our other identities as coalitionally including race, we face a risk, and a risk that has manifest in many spaces. We face a risk that in our work to promote equality and equity, we leave people behind. We sacrifice and erase people on the basis of their race, on the basis of their gender, on the basis of their income level, on the basis of their citizenship status. And this too is the intended operation of patriarchy and white supremacy. This too is the intended operation of power dynamics that normalize and legitimize the exploitation of certain people, the expendability of certain populations, the disposability of certain folks. So for us, if we want to move forward, if we want to fight racial discrimination, we need to think of race in its intersections. We need to think of race as coalitional. We need to see ourselves as showing up in our anti-racism, armed with the tools of anti-misogyny, anti-misogynoir, anti-homophobia, anti-transphobia. These are the steps, these are the tools that can allow us to really meaningfully interrogate and dismantle systemic racisms in our spaces.
In my view, the first step is the placement of race firmly into the political narrative about solutions that need to be crafted. I think the last couple of years have been crucial in demonstrating that unless we address the racialized nature of violence and discrimination against LGBT people, we will not make significant inroads into addressing or eradicating those forms of violence and discrimination. And a lot takes point of departure in that insertion in the political narrative, because the United Nations, as the ultimate expression of international politics and diplomacy, is heavily reliant on that acknowledgement, that recognition, that call-out, in order for actions to trickle down programs and actions and monitoring and evaluation systems and country dialogues, and also, of course, the human rights machinery. In my view, there is an equation that follows certain good practice when it comes to social change. When it comes to addressing violence and discrimination, it is important to follow the principle according to which acknowledgement of the different populations and communities historically subjected to discrimination, supporting the organizations led by them and that serve them, protecting them from violations that occur in their quest for justice, understanding that indirect discrimination is a real risk and bringing it into the design of risk management, accepting that representation is key, and ensuring that representation exists, including in the actions to ensure proper political participation of communities and populations historically subjected to discrimination. And finally, embracing evidence-based approaches, thus abandoning actions based on prejudice and stigma. All of these actions together spell ASPIRE, the ASPIRE guidelines that I issued to ensure COVID-19 response that is free from violence and discrimination. I believe that they're applicable to different scenarios where we are hoping to address and ultimately eradicate violence and discrimination against different communities and populations.